Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to that tree? Were you there when they nailed him to that tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to that tree? Were you there when they pierced him to his side? Were you there when they pierced him to his side? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they pierced him to his side?
My friends and I went running through the streets of Jerusalem. Jesus was coming and we wanted to see him. There were so many people in the street. They were shouting and singing and waving palm branches. They shouted, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." A man handed branches to us and we waved them and sang too. We loved Jesus so much. Then the streets grew quiet. There he was, sitting upon a young colt, surrounded by his disciples. Again we shouted, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." That was last Sunday, not even a week ago. Yesterday afternoon, my mother sent me on an errand to the silversmith to pick up a chalice. Jesus and his disciples were going to eat the Passover meal in the upper chambers of her house. She wanted a special cup for Jesus, her gift to him. While she and the servants prepared a meal and baked the unleavened bread, I ran to the silversmith. Last night, I watched Jesus and his disciples climb the stairs to the room. They closed the door behind them. After a while, Judas, his treasurer, came down the stairs and disappeared into the darkness. Did my parents forget to buy something? I wondered. Is that why Judas is leaving? I waited under the steps, hoping to see Jesus when they finished the meal. Judas never did return. I was getting sleepy when Jesus and his other disciples came down the stairs, singing a psalm of David. I decided to follow them. Maybe I can talk to Jesus, I thought. They went to the Mount of Olives and entered the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus and 3 of his disciples left the others and disappeared into the darkness to pray. I grew tired and thought I was going to fall asleep, but I was determined to talk to Jesus. Suddenly, the noise of marching feet and angry voices startled me. Now I was wide awake. I peered into the darkness, made brighter by flaming torches. Soldiers and men from the temple filled the garden. Then Judas stepped out of the darkness. He went up to Jesus and kissed his cheek, then quickly disappeared into the night. The soldiers grabbed Jesus and took him away, and I ran home to tell my parents what I had seen.
We called him Judas the Iscariot, but we should have called him Judas the Jealous. Some say I'm too sensitive, but I was always uneasy around him. He was so intense. They say he did, you know what he did, for money. But I don't believe that was the main reason. Women often understand emotions better than men do. We study men's moods the way they study the scriptures. It was injured pride, not greed, that sent Judas to the temple elders. Maybe that's why Jesus always warned us against pride. Judas was such a proud man. He wasn't content with being one of the 12. He wanted to be the most important one of the 12. When Jesus declared that Simon Peter would be the foundation of his church, I was standing near Judas. I could feel the waves of hatred pouring out of him. I could almost hear his thoughts. Why Simon the fisherman? Why not me? I'm more sophisticated. I'm better educated. I deserve to be the leader. It's not fair. I wondered if that was the moment he made his decision. Judas was blinded by pride. He wasn't a man that others looked to for leadership. His talent was for organization, but crowds don't cheer the organizer. He didn't feel appreciated enough. Toward the end, I think he was even jealous of Jesus. He probably asked God why Mary, the carpenter's wife, was chosen to bear the Messiah. Why her? Why not his mother? And finally, he decided to make sure he was never overlooked again. Never again would he just be one of the 12. He chose to be hated instead of ordinary. If he couldn't be famous, he would be infamous. That pride, that sinful pride, made him bitter and destructive. So he destroyed the one that tried to save him. And in doing so, he destroyed the good in himself. The temple elders didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, but Judas did. He wanted to be known as the man who betrayed Christ. If the elders had understood that, they could have saved themselves 30 pieces of silver. He only wanted the power and prestige. The money was insignificant. But they study scripture, not emotions. It seems to me that the elders could have arrested Jesus without Judas's help. I don't understand why it had to be so complicated. With Jesus and Caiaphas and Pilate and Herod, it was like an elaborate dance that everyone had an assigned part in. Maybe Satan was amusing himself. Or maybe the entire thing was preordained by God. Maybe Judas's mother had been chosen to bear the betrayer. Or maybe Jesus chose Judas because he knew that in order to die for us, he needed someone to betray him. He needed a jealous man. So I guess Judas was the most important one of the 12 after all. He should be so proud.
As long as the name of Jesus is remembered, the name of Judas will be remembered. As long as people talk of the Messiah, they will talk about the one who took him down. We will be partners, Jesus and I. We will be linked like Cain and Abel. How perfect. As you recall, Cain slew Abel. Those fools at the temple thought they were using me. They did not dare arrest him on their own. They wanted to be able to say, see, even his own followers believe he should be silenced. They didn't have any fearlessness. The truth is that I used them. They thought they bought me, but when it was finished, I went back and threw their money in their faces. Did they really think I would sell my soul for so little? I wouldn't have betrayed the Messiah for all the silver in the world. The feeling of power, though, no, that's another matter entirely. It's even better than I imagined. It is more intoxicating than the strongest wine. Judas the Iscariot defeated Jesus the Christ. I have committed the ultimate act of revenge. I handed my my Lord and Savior to his enemies. He said, "Deliver us from evil," and I delivered him to evil. Even the mighty Caesar has done nothing so immense as I. Technically speaking, of course, Jesus was not my Savior, since he didn't save me. He never stopped trying, though. I'll give him that. Even in those last few days, when he hinted that he knew what I was plotting, he cared more about saving me than saving himself. He simply wouldn't give up on me. He would have forgiven me in his last dying breath if I had only asked, but I didn't want his forgiveness. I wanted him to love me more than he loved the others. Instead, he praised my ability to organize. Well, he was right. I did a superb job of organizing his betrayal. It was carefully planned and brilliantly executed. Brilliantly executed. Pardon the expression. The man who is strong-willed enough to carry out such a deed is not going to fall apart to remorse after it is done. He knew me better than that. But even though it was hopeless, he still hoped. He insisted on dying as he lived a Savior to the end. He had no regrets, and neither did I. My only problem is what to do now. Everything after today is going to be a letdown, a descent into mediocrity, as it were, becoming a pathetic has-been endlessly recounting his greatest achievement. I would rather be dead. I want the crowds to hate me as much as they loved him. I want the world to regard me as the most treacherous villain ever known. I want the name of Judas to be synonymous with traitor. If this is my greatest moment, then let it be my last. I see now what must be done. My fate must be the same as my partner's. It's the only logical course of action. As I doubt the Romans will assist me as they did him, I will have to take matters into my own hands. Once again, I will be in control. Such a feeling of power. The man who destroyed Jesus will destroy Judas. How perfect.
My name is Barabbas. Yes, that Barabbas. My name means son of the Father. Bar, Abba. Maybe you've even heard Jesus teach us to pray, Abba, Father. That's a bit of an irony for me. My name just happens to be Son of the Father. But Jesus is the Son of the Father. I have changed a lot today. I have given my life to Christ. But that is not what you came here to hear about. I was in jail for murder and insurrection against Rome. I was stupid enough to get caught, and yes, I was guilty on both counts. My trial had already been held, and the verdict was death, of course. It wasn't much of a trial, apparently like that one that Jesus had. Again, a strange connection to the man. I was just waiting for my final punishment, which was to come swiftly. I could hear commotion outside. Only later I understood that it was the crowd watching the tormenting of Jesus. At one point I heard the crowd cry out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" over and over again. I assumed the chants were for me. Pilate often gave the people a choice of choosing death by decapitation or crucifixion. I collapsed onto the cell floor. I had hoped for the quicker death. Soon I heard the stampeding of soldiers' feet, the keys jingling in the lock, and then they dragged me out into the courtyard. I saw Jesus struggling underneath his cross, just beginning to carry it toward that horrible hill. I am not strong. I don't have that kind of courage. I sobbed and dropped to the paving stones. "No, no, please don't," I cried. The soldiers kicked me in the ribs and said, "Get up, get out of here, go." It had to be a trap, the way to spear me as I supposedly escaped. But that would be better than a crucifixion. I stood again. He said, "Go, Pilate has substituted that man for you." They turned and left it. It was true. I had been set free. I stood and watched as Jesus hefted the cross and began his journey, staggering under its weight. I watched until he faded from view up that painful path. I was free. He was condemned. I was alive. Soon he would be dead. He had taken my place on the cross. But why did the crowd choose me to save instead of him? Who do they think I am? Or rather, who do they think he is?
I am Simon of Cyrene. Just so you don't confuse me with Simon Peter, or Simon the brother of James and Jude, or Simon the leper, or Simon the Pharisee, or the father of Judas Iscariot, and the magician living in Samaria. There are so many Simons. I thought though, am Simon of Cyrene, just off the north coast of Africa. Many years ago, my father returned from the trade mission to Jerusalem and declared that we, even though we were Greek, were not to believe in the one and only God of the Jews. For years I had yearned to go to Jerusalem to attend the great Passover feast. It was not until I was grown and a father myself that I was able to make that great journey. What a celebration it was. But the part of my story I must tell really begins today. A tremendous noise drew me, and I pushed my way into the crowd, shouting what was going on. They said that Jesus, the one they thought could have been the Messiah we were all waiting for, was on the way to Golgotha to be crucified. Messiah Jesus was to be crucified? I had so many questions. A guard of soldiers came along, pushing the crowd back with whips and staves. The people retreated a bit, but I stood my ground suddenly in the forefront of the crowd. I could see Jesus laboring up the hill under the weight of his own cross. Some people in the crowd wept. Others tossed garbage and spat on him. He was bloodied from head to foot. His clothes turned, his fists were ripped to shreds, and his back bowed under the weight of his cross. He toiled on one foot and then the next. It was a long way to the top of the hill. As he approached me, he looked up and our eyes met. I could see the pain, but also the depth of the love he carried. I detected the faintest smile, then he collapsed at my feet. He didn't move. A soldier stabbed him in the back with a stave and shouted, get up, but he did not get up. The centurion ordered the soldier to stop jabbing at him. Everything came to a halt, then the crowd began to press in. The centurion looked around the crowd, then right at me, probably because I am darker than the others, being Cyrenian. He spoke to me in Greek, said, "You, pick up that cross." I could not retreat through the solid wall of flesh behind me. The centurion's hand me on his dagger left me no choice. I stopped down and struggled to grasp it. It was awkward. I staggered. They make these crosses out of solid wood. I managed to hoist it onto my shoulders and balance it. It was going to be a long, hard journey to the top, even for me. The centurion gently pulled Jesus to his feet. Jesus turned to me and said, "Thank you, brother." Then turned to face the hill ahead. I watched him as we struggled upward. I will not describe what happened next, but what I saw and heard on that cross today changed me forever. I was honored today to carry the cross of Christ, the one who called me brother and has changed my life forever. Today the blood of Jesus was all over me. We share slivers from the same cross. My name is Simon, and I am from Cyrene.
I don't belong here. I really don't. Paradise is the last place I expected to end up after all I had done. You see, I was an armed robber. Me and Jacob and the others would live in caves in the hills near the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. We made our living by violence. We wouldn't take on people in the big groups that passed.
they traveled together for safety. But a family alone was an easy target, as well as anyone fool enough to travel by himself. Brandishing a strong staff usually did the trick, threatening them with a beating, and they'd give up without much of a fight. But I've been known to break a few bones when required. God forgive me. I don't think I've ever actually killed anyone, but I've never stayed around long enough to know. The first time I met Jesus was when I was invited to a party in his honor in Jericho, at the home of a rich tax collector named Zacharias. We were introduced, shook hands, and Jesus looked me in the eye for a long moment. He could see right into me, who I was, every crime I had ever committed. Then he smiled this friendly smile and said, "You know, there's forgiveness for you in my kingdom. Just ask." I dropped my eyes, muttered something non-committal, and shuffled away. The next day, I'm in the crowd, hanging on to every word he says. Jesus is talking about his kingdom, comparing it to a mustard seed, calling it the kingdom of heaven. I wanted so much to go up to him afterwards and take him up on the forgiveness thing, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I wish I had. It wasn't much later that me and my friend Jacob, the man that was on the third cross today, got caught by a Roman patrol. The others ran off, but they got us, beat us silly, and dragged us into Jerusalem, where we were thrown into prison. No mercy for the likes of us. And so it happens that day, the day they crucified Jesus, they crucified me and Jacob. One of us on his left, and one of us on his right. This ain't no normal crucifixion. There were mobs of people there, just because of Jesus. Self-righteous Pharisees and swaggering and mocking. "If you're some kind of Messiah, come down from that cross," one of them sneered. And called another, "If you're a savior, save yourself." Jacob began catcalling too, if you can imagine that. I yelled over to him, "You miserable thug, have you no fear of God? Can you see we are going to die just like he is? Show a little decency. We are getting exactly what we deserve, but he's done nothing." Jacob quieted after that, and the Pharisees lost interest. But I couldn't get Jericho out of my mind. I couldn't forget Jesus' eyes, his words, his invitation. So I called over to him, even though it was getting hard to breathe, and talking made it much harder. "Jesus," I said. He turned his head towards me. "Jesus, I was there in Jericho. I met you at a party at Zacharias' house. Remember?" He looked at me for a moment and then nodded his head just a little. He did remember. "I never forgot what you said. I wanted to say yes, but I just couldn't. And now look at me. Look at us." He was in bad shape, exhausted, excruciating pain, blood oozing, breath labored. He wasn't going to last much longer. I could see that much. But somehow, I could see beyond all of that too. He was the Messiah. He is the Messiah. No matter what the priests and the Romans and the Pharisees did to him, I knew that when he died, he would be with God. He would reign in that kingdom he told us about. "Jesus," I called again, much quieter that time. He opened his eyes. They were the same eyes, the same piercing, loving, honest eyes. "Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, will you remember me?" I asked. His words were labored, his lips were parched, and I could see him pretty well. "Truly I say to you," his voice cracked, then stronger for a moment, "truly this very day you will be with me in paradise." His eyes dropped. He was fading quickly at that point, but I believed him. That's what got me through the next few hours until they broke my legs to kill me off. I believed him. And now I find myself here in heaven, in paradise. I sure don't deserve to be here, but here I am anyway. I guess it's what a man like me gets when the king himself grants a pardon. Full forgiveness. Pretty amazing, don't you think?
There were so many things that I wanted to say to my son, and I thought there would be time, but time has run out. So I'll say these things to you tonight instead. I was so young when the angel Gabriel first appeared to me and told me about God's blessing upon me. I was confused. I truly didn't know how it could happen. And I was a little worried, too, mostly about Joseph and how he would handle it. Seems now that all of that was an awful lot for a teenager to have to handle. And I look now at the young girls in Galilee with the ribbons in their hair and laughter in their voices. Oh, I can't imagine ever being that carefree, that young. I feel so old now. You see, when I looked at him, I saw the little baby that I held that very first time in my arms. His father and I had traveled a long way by donkey to Bethlehem for the census. It was an uncertain time, a scary time, and his father tried so hard not to show how nervous he was, but I could tell. And then when we finally arrived and there was no room for us anywhere, he was almost at a breaking point. I know he was. He apologized so many times as he led me into that barn, but truly I didn't care. I was tired, and I just wanted somewhere warm and quiet so I could lie down. I was in so much pain that night. I was ready. But the pain that night was nothing compared to the pain of today. You see, when I first became pregnant, I told my sister Elizabeth that generations would call me blessed. Well, I'm not so sure anymore. I never told anyone about the day we presented him at the temple. You might have heard what the prophet had said about him, that he would be a light for revelation to the Gentiles and a glory to our people. And he was. You have been, my son. Your kindness to the outcasts, it's drawn people to you, and in you, people have seen the face of God. But it also drew unwanted attention to you. Anger and hatred, and at times, oh, I wanted you to be a little quieter, a little more cautious around the Pharisees. You could have, you know. You didn't always have to provoke. You didn't always have to speak the truth, did you? And yet I know in doing that, softening your words or backing down, it would have made you a different man. Would I have wanted you to be a different man? How could I have wanted him to be a different man? He's the hope of Israel. He's the hope of all mankind. The part I never told anyone was the prophet said that a sword would pierce my soul. I didn't know what he meant, but I know now. He's my son. I always wanted to protect him from pain. I hated every bruise and scrape, but I couldn't protect him from pain when he was little, and I was helpless to stop any of the violence inflicted on my dear son today. I felt the lashes on his back, the back that I used to wash when he was a little boy. I screamed until my throat was raw at those who hurled awful names at him. The son whose name I whispered daily in my prayers. And I wept when they crushed that crown of thorns on his head. It's the head that I would kiss goodnight every night as I laid him to bed. But when they drove the spikes through his hands, the hands that I held in my own as we walked down the road, I felt the sword pierce my soul. I stood at the foot of the cross today, and all generations will call me blessed.
Some men say I used to be. Remember? Well, I used to be a dancer of sorts. Danced in a poky little bar, threadbare carpet on the floor, a room lit by smoky lamps. I would wave my arms and crash my cymbals, throw my head back so my hair would stream across my shoulders. I would make my eyes swim, a languishing look, so each man there thought I was dancing just for him. I could sing a little too, not in a good voice, but when I sang, I would drop my eyelids, so I looked half asleep. When you sing that way to a man, he isn't paying attention to your voice. Oh, you don't think much of me, right? Well, what would you have done if you had been born a girl in Magdala? We lived in a mud house on the bank of the Sea of Galilee, not far from Capernaum. House running over with kids, rags on their backs, food from the garbage, flies, a filthy place, Magdala. Oh, some people in Magdala had money. The town sent tributes every year to the temple at Jerusalem. But my family? We didn't even have anything. But even my dancing didn't last long. I got sick one night, dizzy, and I fell. So I lost my job. So then, well, have you ever had to figure out how you would even eat? So I was a prostitute. I'm not proud of it, but that is what I did so I could eat. One night, a Pharisee sent for me to come to his house. He had guests coming, he said. I was to dance and sing, and whatever else they might want, he said. I took a little alabaster jar of perfume. It cost a lot, but men like perfume, and I thought maybe one of his rich friends would take a liking to me. But there was no dancing that night. Someone had brought this man. People sat around on the floor, listening to him. I couldn't hear very well, so I tried to get closer. I squeezed past a couple of men, and then I felt this dizziness coming on, just like before. And I knew if I fell, I would lose this job too. But I did fall, and lay there twitching and jerking. I felt someone touch me. The man laid his hand on my head. My body stopped the jerking. He looked at me for a minute. There was no contempt in his eyes, just a kind of love, not like I had seen in other men's eyes. No, not like that. He smiled at me, then went back to his seat. I sat up and was looking stupidly around me, and I saw the perfume still in my hand, and I crawled, yes, crawled on my hands and knees out of the mud of my life over to his feet. I poured that perfume on his bare feet and wiped them with my hair. Oh, that raised an awful fuss. The men around him muttered about the waste, and about me too. And I heard him say, "Let her alone." And he put out his hand and touched me again. How can I explain it? At that moment came a new person. Oh, not because I think I am, but because I am loved. And then came last night. I heard noises in the street. One of the disciples, Thomas, I think it was, ran in, his eyes wild. He said Judas had betrayed Jesus, and they were taking him to Pilate's court. I ran there and slipped into the back. Jesus stood in the center of the court, his head down and hands tied behind his back. People told such horrible lies. I looked around. There, that leper. He is clean now. He knew. And that man over there, staring straight at Jesus. He had been blind. And that man, once a cripple, now walking around the court. I tried to get closer, but the soldiers shoved me back. "No woman here," they growled. And then one of them recognized me from the old days. He stared at me with a look I knew all too well, so I quickly backed away into the shadows of the courtyard. This morning, I saw them drag Jesus away to Golgotha, where they hung him on a cross. People pushing and shoving, laughing like a picnic. A terrible, terrible picnic. I tried to find Peter. I did see John for a moment with his arms around the mother of Jesus, and then they were swept away in the crowd. I couldn't find James or John. No one. I saw this other soldier I knew from before. He picked up his spear and thrust it into the side of Jesus. Oh God, And I stayed through it all, my heart breaking, until they took down his body and carried it to the garden. And I watched them roll the stone across his grave. And there was no more time. No time to tell him how much I love him. No time for more perfume.
Before you even ask, I have been disabled since I was 3. I don't know exactly how it happened, but I do know my father was buried. My earliest memories are of him loudly demanding to know why God had punished himself. Him, not me, mind you. It never occurred to him that it might be my disability wasn't a punishment, but a test. If this was like God's way of testing my father, I assure you he failed. It is difficult enough to be like this, but I was reminded daily that I was a burden, a curse even. I am sure he was greatly relieved to be rid of me. The ironic thing is that I am better off than a lot of women. I shudder to think what kind of husband my father would have chosen for me if I hadn't been deformed. Instead, I am here in Jerusalem, answering to no one. My fellow beggars are my family now. We watch out for each other, care for each other. I'm better loved as a beggar than I was as a daughter. And when people pity me, they pay for the privilege of feeling superior. There is an art to begging. You need to ask the right person at the right moment. It helps to have a good spot, and I have one of the best, right outside the temple. I serve a very useful function. The rich give money to me so that everyone will see and admire them. They get the congratulations, I get the coins. It's a win-win situation. Everybody's happy. Except on the day that Jesus came to the temple. I've never seen the bigwigs so angry. It was days before they were in charitable mood again. It was worth the lost income, though, to see those scoundrels humiliated. I had always heard Jesus was a man who preached of peace, but he sure read them the riot act that day. It's no wonder they decided he was too dangerous to leave. Does it surprise you that I know of Jesus? Don't forget, the temple is the center of everything. The priests get better information than the Romans, and we beggars may as well be invisible as far as they're concerned. They say nothing in front of us that they wouldn't say with their wives present. So I knew of Jesus and his miracles some time ago. I know what you're thinking. If I knew about the miracles, why didn't I ask Jesus to heal me? Heal me for what? I've been like this since I was 3. I have no training in even the most basic household tasks. No man would want an unskilled wife. Where would I go? To my father's house? No, thank you. I don't want to be loved because I'm perfect. I want to be loved because I'm a person. If everyone was like Jesus, maybe I would have asked for healing. But if everyone was like Jesus, I would be valued just as I am. Well, enough of that. I don't have time for dreams. I need to get back to work. People are feeling guilty about the death of Jesus today, so business should be good for a while. They get their crucifixion, I get the coins. It's a win-win situation. The only one who lost was Jesus, unless we all lost. Who knows? Maybe God sent this Jesus as a test. I'm just not sure who was being tested. Maybe we all were.
Jesus used to call me foolish woman, but I didn't mind. He wasn't annoyed or impatient with me. He knew most times I was just saying out loud what the others were thinking. They were afraid to look foolish, but it didn't bother me one bit. Jesus would tell a story, and I would say, "Teacher, I don't understand." So he would tell another story. Usually I wouldn't understand that one either, to be honest. I remember them all, though. Once everything settles down, I'm going to think long and hard about them. I'll figure them out eventually. It was a funny thing about Jesus. He almost never gave you a straight answer. Part of that was because there were informants hanging around who would run right to the temple and repeat everything Jesus said. I bet they didn't understand the stories any more than I did. But I also think maybe Jesus wanted us to work things out for ourselves. After all, if a thing is just handed to you, you don't appreciate it in the way that you do something that you've struggled for. Sometimes it's hard to be patient, though. I got impatient one time and asked Jesus something that I'm a bit ashamed of now. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I asked him to promise me that my 2 sons would sit on either side of him in his kingdom. The others got angry with James and John when they should have been angry with me. I guess they thought I was just a foolish woman who didn't know any better. They didn't understand what I meant, though, where I was coming from. I'm not good at explaining things. Jesus loved us all, but he had a closeness with my boy John. I always just assumed that John would be at his side in paradise. I just wanted to make sure James would be there too. I was just being a mother. Jesus scolded me, but he wasn't angry with me, just sad. The others had all been thinking the same thing. They were upset because I got my request in before they did. I am sure it hurt Jesus to hear us all squabbling over something so petty. He had much bigger things on his mind. He even tried to tell us in a roundabout sort of way what was going to happen, but none of us figured it out in time. Now, well, we've got all the time in the world to figure things out. My son John says that Jesus took all of our sins upon himself, and that's why he died the way he did today. But it's so confusing to me. If our salvation is just handed to us, how can we appreciate it the way we would if we had worked for it? I don't understand. But then again, I am just a foolish woman.
My husband claims that the hardest words to say are, "I was wrong and you were right." That must be true, since he's never ever said them. In fairness to him, though, as governor, any apology would be taken as a sign of weakness. The slightest hint of weakness, and his enemies would attack like rabid hyenas. Everyone thinks it must be wonderful to be governor. The fools have no idea what it's really like. My pilot is caught in the middle between Rome and Israel. Rome wants the territory under control, no matter what it takes. The Jews want to be free, no matter what it takes. Are you beginning to see the problem? My husband crushes one rebellion, and 10 more spring up. Rome expects him to rule with a firm hand, then questions the need for so many crucifixions. Pilate has explained again and again that those Jewish rebels are fanatics. They cannot be bought off like a Roman senator. Their religion allows for no compromise. They demand liberty or death. So my husband obliges them, but every death kills a small piece of his heart. Eventually, he will truly become as heartless as they accuse him of being. Not every Jew is incomparable, though. Herod's palace is buzzing with intrigue. I would be very cautious about drinking the wine in that household. Herodia does not appreciate the precariousness of her situation. She managed to get a prisoner beheaded for insulting her. But Herod didn't do it for her. He did it for Salome. I've seen the way the king looks at his stepdaughter, and who would dare admonish the king now? John the Baptizer was a fine example for anyone who would point out the king's sins. Herodias plotted against the wrong threat. She was wrong, and the baptizer was right. She will realize that the night her food is poisoned. The high priest of the temple was also plotted against the wrong threat. He also needs to look within his own house for villains, instead of blaming the one who pointed out the villainy. And in one conspiring with the villain who betrayed the Nazarene, Caiaphas became a villain himself. Even if he never realizes that, he will never admit it. I was wrong, and you were right. Those may indeed be the hardest words to say, but the hardest words not to say are, I told you so. My husband let himself be used by the Jewish leaders in spite of my warning. He did their dirty work for them. I begged him not to, but he killed an innocent man today. He killed a righteous man today. To keep the peace, I ask you, does Jerusalem feel peaceful tonight? Is Israel finally at peace? I tell you truly, my husband will never be at peace again. At least Jesus of Nazareth got to die for his faith. He does not have to live on without it. I told you so. For the rest of my days, those words are going to burn like fire inside of me. But know this, I will never, ever speak them aloud. I will watch my husband slowly deteriorate, and I will never mention today again, because he was wrong, and I was right.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they laid him in that tomb? Were you there when they laid him in that tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in that tomb?
It is finished.